You're listening to the Actors Resource Podcast with Aaliyah Lay, a podcast for actors and improvisers with interviews from entertainment industry experts.
Our guest today is David Dean Bottrell, who has played guest star roles on shows like Modern Family, The Blacklist, Law & Order SVU, Mad Men, and many, many others. His many theater credits include Second Stage, Wharf, Humana Festival at Actors Theatre of Louisville, plus sketch and storytelling shows at Dixon Place, Comedy Central Stage, and Joe's Pub at the Public Theater. He has been a columnist for Backstage.com, written off-Broadway plays and screenplays for many Hollywood studios. He created and for 3 years co-produced the critically acclaimed Sci-Fest LA, the Los Angeles science fiction one-act play festival. His first book, Working Actor, was published in 2019 by 10 Speed Press. His current one-man show, David Dean Bottrell Makes Love, a one-man show, will be released as an audiobook by Random House in 2020. Thank you, David, for being our guest here on the Actors Resource Podcast.
It's my pleasure, Aaliyah. Nice to meet you.
My first question to you is, how did you first get started as an actor?
Completely by accident.
Awesome.
I was a very, very shy and quiet kid. And when I got into high school, I was fascinated and just obsessed with painting and drawing. It was something I loved to do. And I didn't have to really talk to people. And I got praise from my art instructors for doing it. And I just sort of thought that's what I was going to do with my life. And then I happened to go to, I don't even know why, I went to this high school play. Mm-hmm. And there was a girl in it who was so beautiful. And I was just so taken with her that I became sort of obsessed and I wanted to meet her, but I had no idea how. And so it took me a year to work up my guts. This was when I was a freshman. And when I was a sophomore, I went in and auditioned for a play just so I could meet her.
Oh my God.
And I know, isn't that insane? And
I love it.
There were 5 roles for boys in the play, and exactly 5 boys auditioned. So I got in.
Hey.
And then it turns out she wasn't in that play. So I was stuck in this play that I didn't really want to be in. And it was a comedy. And I don't think I was very good, but I had some funny lines. And I stood up in front of people and said them out loud. Yeah. And people laughed. And it was electric. You know, it was just amazing. I had never received that kind of attention. And I was, it wasn't me. I was somebody else. And I guess that's the thrill of acting, really, is you get to step out of yourself. And I just became obsessed after that point. I just loved it. And to this day, I'm still doing it. Yeah. But it all began with being 15 years old and crazy in love with somebody.
With a stranger that you didn't know. I love that.
I did get to know her, by the way. I mean, subsequently, I was in a bunch of plays with her. And we got to be good friends.
And that was it.
That was it.
Did you profess your love to her, or was it over by the time you became friends?
There was I think I was always, in my weird way, I think I stayed in love with her forever. We reconnected just a few years ago, interestingly enough. And again, just by kind of a fluky thing. Mm-hmm. And it was nice to touch base with her again and see that we were all still basically the same people we were in high school.
Wow.
So it was nice. It was fun.
That's cool. Okay, so from there, that's how you first got started. That's how you first got your acting bug, right?
Yeah.
At what point did you decide to make acting a career?
I was living in Austin, Texas at the time. I was a college dropout. I was acting in a community theater play. And across town, there was a professional dinner theater, which was, seemed very glamorous to me at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, that these people were just across town and they were getting paid to do the same thing that I was doing here for free. Mm. And I guess I was maybe 20 years old at this time. And I was kind of crabby that night that we were doing the show because I was just kind of jealous of them and all that. And I, again, was doing another comedy. And I walked out on stage. And because of the configuration of the stage, which was in the round, I could see the audience better than you usually can see them on stage. They were all the way around us on all 4 sides. And I walked out. And as I did, I saw everybody's heads turn toward me and smile. And I hadn't even done anything yet. And these people were like happy to see me already just because I was willing to get up in front of them and try to entertain them. And I suddenly, all my feelings of being crabby and jealous went away and I felt great. And I just felt energized and happy to be alive and happy to be doing this. And that was the night when I drove home that night from that show, I said, I'm going to figure out a way to get to New York and see if I can do this. And about, I don't know, probably less than a year later, I was in New York.
Wow.
And it began.
Did you grow up in Austin, Texas as well?
I didn't. No, I actually grew up in Kentucky and a little bit in Southern Ohio, but I'm from Kentucky. My family's from Kentucky originally. And then I went to college very briefly in Texas, but college was not a great success for me. I was not.
You didn't like it. You dropped out.
I never really liked school, quite honestly. I liked studying acting a lot. I was a good student at that, but I was, for the most part, I'm a pretty smart person, but I didn't love school. I didn't love being trapped in there with everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that comes to script analysis, but that's on another time. Anyways, okay. So then you chose to move to New York from Texas, right? So why New York versus LA, right? Because those are the two big hubs.
Yeah. I think it was because I had really only done plays at that time in my career. I mean, I had no career at all. I was just beginning, but I'd only done plays. I had really never been in front of a camera ever. And I certainly watched TV shows and film, as everybody does, but it didn't, I don't know, that didn't seem to be like a real thing to me at the time. I just sort of thought, oh, acting was being in a play. And I also I'd sort of become so immersed in theater, and I read all these books about it, and I was kind of almost encyclopedic about my knowledge of New York theater, that it felt like I had to go and find out, like I had to go and try it. And so that I was just obsessed with it. I was kind of drawn to it like a missile. And fortunately for me, I wound up in an acting class by a very, very iconic acting teacher, a guy named William Esper.
Oh, yeah.
Who just passed away about 2 years ago. Very remarkable teacher with a remarkable list of students that have done quite well in the business.
I have heard of the Esper Studio.
Yeah, he was something. And he was particularly something in those days. He was quite a tough teacher, but I learned a lot. And actually, even before I finished the 2-year program that he did, or taught, I should say, I got my first job.
As an actor?
Yeah, and an equity show. And so that was the beginning of it. Yeah.
Wow, you got paid.
I did. I got paid. It was crazy. I think I was 22 or 23, something like that, when I got my first job. And it was a terrible play, truly terrible, but I was in it. and it was, it was a great experience because I sort of learned that acting was not just a dream. It was a job. Like when you actually had a job as an actor, it was a real job.
Yeah. And
you had to show up and knock those shows out, like 8 a week. And I learned a lot from that. I really did. But it was the beginning of it. It was the beginning of my kind of understanding that a dream becomes a craft, becomes a career,
Yeah. You looking back now, so you had a trajectory, you had a passion. It sounds like you were obsessed. So it sounds like you didn't really have a lot of doubts or, like sometimes when people start deciding to make this into a career, sometimes there's doubts, right? Or even if they don't have doubts, maybe their friends or family will have doubts. Did you experience any of that? Or were you just you did?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
How did you navigate that?
Well, there were a couple of things that helped. One of them was I was very lucky in my choice of, I shouldn't say my choice, I should say my good luck of getting into Bill Esper's class, because it was not easy to get into his class. And he didn't want to see you act. He just wanted to talk to you as a person. And somehow I passed the interview and got in. But what I loved about his class was that it demystified things a little bit to me. Mm-hmm. He would really say, this is what you need to know how to do. You need to know how to do this thing.
Nice.
And the only way you're going to really learn it is by practicing it. And this is where you practice it. So practice hard and take it seriously and get better so that it not only works here in this classroom, it works when you leave this classroom and go somewhere else and audition or work with other actors or do a different kind of project. So part of it was I was blessed that somebody instilled a little confidence in me that I had some skills, because talent is great. I think actually a lot of people have talent, but they don't always kind of spend the time they need to get skilled, which means you can access that talent when you need it. You can access that imagination and that creativity when you need it. And that's what all of acting class should be about, is about learning those tricks, if you will, that you can play on yourself that will get you into a scene or put you inside the shoes of a character. So that was the first thing. I had a little faith in the kind of concrete stuff that he taught. And the other one was I didn't really get a lot of I come from a very working class family and they're great folks, but this was pie in the sky. It was Alice in Wonderland to them, you know? So I didn't really have that. I had my fellow young actors, which we all were pretty supportive of each other.
Nice.
And luckily I graduated from that studio with Bill with a fairly talented group. Not everybody in that group is still in the acting business, but there's probably about 6 of us that still are. And we're still in touch, you know, and it's a lovely legacy.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I think the best advice I have for anybody is to create that system for yourself, you know, and I did want it. I wanted it really badly. I wanted to be good at it.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything, I wanted to be good at it. And that fortunately led me to some employment. And that really helped too. The idea that somebody actually would pay me money made me believe that maybe somebody else would pay me money. And so it was, I'll tell you, it was a gradual thing. I didn't just come out of the chute with wild confidence. I was scared, as a lot of people are.
Yeah.
But I sure wanted to find out. And again, I was lucky to have a few things that were encouraging, both events and people that were encouraging to me. Now, I have a question for you. Are you a Southern California native? Did you start out in Southern California?
A question for me. This isn't about me. So real quick, Northern California, not native. My parents and I immigrated from Hong Kong when I was 3. And in grade school, I had this epiphany.
Huh?
I want to be an actor. That's it. That's it. I was so excited. And my dad happened to pick me up after school that one day. And I told him, and he laughed in my face. And he was like, there's no way you can ever be an actor. Look at you. Look at the TV shows. Nobody looks like you on TV. So without displaying my age, it was decades ago. And he was right. There wasn't people I saw that looked like me. So I was crushed. And I did not go back into considering it until I graduated from college. Mm-hmm. So it was always still in me. Yeah. Obviously, because here I am now, and now I'm an actor. And it's been a road. I'm still here. And like you, I'm just constantly working on my craft as well as my confidence in myself with my craft.
Yes. It's really important. I will tell you, as you very graciously mentioned, I just wrote a book about being a professional actor. And it's really, honestly, it's applicable to being a professional artist of any kind. But one of the things that I talk about, a few things in there that are not always talked about in career books, acting career books. Yeah. Because I talk a little bit about the personal side of this and the life that you are signing up for, and some things that really, if you don't really, if you're not really comfortable with these circumstances, this might not be the best career for you. And if you're not confident about certain truths about this business, then this might not be a great career for you either. But one of them is you have to have a kind of belief in yourself. You have to have a kind of an ego to do this work, because when it's handed to you, you're expected to shine. You're expected to not just kind of be able to do it. You're expected to be able to do it in a way that draws attention to yourself. Mm. And you got to be comfortable with that. And I think I'm a reasonably nice, modest person in real life. But when I'm acting, I do understand that is the place where I have to step up. Mm. And I have to believe that I'm, kind of fascinating to look at. I'm not talking about gorgeous. I'm just talking about fascinating to look at, because there's something going on inside me, and also going on between me and the other person. The most important thing, obviously, and that is interesting, that is going to hold the interest of people, that what's happening with me is worth seeing and worth looking at. And whatever we need to do in acting class or in our therapist's office or whatever, to get to the place where we are not ashamed or uncomfortable with taking the spotlight when it's handed to us, is really important. Mm. There are a lot of people in this field. It's a competitive field. So when the opportunity is given, we really do. We want to not only relish it, but we want to fill the shoes of that character. We want to fill that screen. We want to fill that stage so that people can see us and enjoy our work, and then we can entertain them and move them or teach them or whatever the writer or whatever the story's about. We want to convey it.
Yeah. That is huge. Thank you for sharing that, because that is one of the things that I have to step into is that. So thank you. Okay, so now back to you. So you fell into Bill Esper Studios. As you know, there's a bazillion different studios, acting teachers, coaches. Do you have advice for how do you choose the right studio or great coach for you versus just wasting your time, spinning your wheels, but you're not actually improving?
Yeah, there are a lot of teachers out there, obviously, and there are a lot of different methods of teaching acting. There are some that are fairly tried and true methods, There's some things like, Meisner and stuff like that, the Uta Hagen stuff. That's all been around a long time.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing that I would say is you don't have to study with people who are uber super duper famous teachers. That's not really necessary, but you need to make sure that you're certainly working with someone who is passionate about the craft of being a better artist. And you need to be able to articulate what you are learning in that class. If you can't really sort of say, I'm learning this specific skill, or I'm sort of learning the building blocks of how you make a character, or how you work in a scene, or how a scene works, or how to behave truthfully, and how to inhabit things, how to use your imagination. If you can't really explain to some other person what's going on in that class, then I don't know what you're exactly learning. Anything you're learning in a class should prepare you for the day that you leave that class. It should be something that you go, oh, okay, I get that. I understand that thing you just said. Yeah. Now let me practice it a little bit. Okay, now I've got that. Now let's take the elevator up to the next floor.
Yeah.
And then the next floor, so that it makes sense, but it needs to be preparing you for the day that you depart that class. And you have to understand what you're learning. It can't be some experiential thing that maybe it works sometimes and maybe it doesn't. And people who teach anecdotally, meaning they're telling you long stories about famous people, I don't have a lot of confidence in that. That was the experience of another actor, another artist who just happens to become famous. That doesn't mean it applies to you. If they're not sort of talking about you and your work and how to change it and improve it in a kind of skill-based way, I personally would be leery of a class that didn't seem to be structured in some way.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, so back to your story. New York, working, plays, theater actor, getting paid. How did you transition into TV, film?
Well, I, like everybody, got sort of intrigued and I went west.
You did go west.
I did. I made a little preliminary trip west, as a lot of actors do at some point. And my first trip to Los Angeles was for 6 months and it was a disaster. But I did get one job on a TV show. So that was good.
Yeah.
It was a terrible experience.
Oh, no.
I mean, it was a very unhappy set and I had never worked on a set before.
Oh.
And the show was trouble. It wasn't my fault.
Right.
But I didn't know why everybody was so tense. I didn't know what the problem, I didn't understand it, nor should I. I was the guest actor, And so it was not a very happy experience. And when I got off of it on that set and drove away, I thought, I never want to be on a TV show again as long as I live. If that's what a TV show is, no thanks.
Whoa.
And retreated back to New York. And then things kind of, we go through patches where we're not employed. And I went through one. And I just was changing. My type was changing. I was getting a little older. I was getting close to 30. And I wasn't really playing youngsters anymore, but I didn't really look old enough to play, whatever my next thing was. I was in this weird kind of in-between place. And I began to write, and I wrote a play, and it was based on something out of my family, which is what a lot of people do. And I had luck. I had some good luck, and it got produced at the Wharf, and then it came into New York, and it was produced at Second Stage.
Nice.
And it did okay, but the good news was it caught the attention of Hollywood, and I was imported west to work as a writer.
Wow. Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I came back to LA the second time as a writer. And that was a very different experience. I still did a little bit of acting, but I wasn't pursuing it. And I became a professional screenwriter, and I wrote for a lot of studios.
Wow.
Which was its own Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole experience.
Wow. Do you talk about this in your acting book?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I do talk about it because the acting profession is changing rapidly. And as you know, it barely resembles what it was 10 years ago. It's undergone such an enormous change. And now with the pandemic, it is undergoing yet another huge change.
Yeah.
But the reason I included it is a lot of people are writing their acting careers now. They're becoming content creators. They're writing an independent movie, or they're writing a pitch for a TV show, or they're writing their way in.
Yes.
Which is, if you can do that, that's a great thing to do. I mean, if you have that ability to make a show of some kind, or a movie or vehicle, make work for yourself, it's a damn good thing to do. So there is a chapter in the book about writing.
Awesome.
But the book is primarily focused on acting, but it's kind of applicable, honestly. I mean, I've also directed and I've done a lot of shit. So
Yeah.
I say that because sometimes I remember I was directing this play at this Equity Theater a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I forget what I was making some reference to myself as an actor. And the woman who was the artistic director was saying, "Oh, no, you're like a Renaissance man. You've acted this, you write, you direct, you have done some producing, and all this kind of stuff."
Right.
And I said to her, that really wasn't by choice, actually. It wasn't like I just sort of thought, oh, I think I'll just explore everything. Because mostly it was because I realized that in order to stay employed, I needed to have, for me anyway, and everybody's career is different, which is the hard part about writing a book about acting. But for me, I realized there was going to be parts for me in this world. But as I got older and I started to change yet again, became very charactery, I thought, oh, okay, I'm, as they say in the acting business, specific. And the casting directors will say, he's very specific. So great, I'm specific. But in the meantime, I also don't want to sit around waiting for specific to show up in the breakdowns. So I try to keep myself employed in doing things that I love doing. So I always stay in my field one way or the other. And it's been fun, actually. I mean, a number of different hats I've been able to wear have been great. So yes, I was screenwriting for a while, to come back to your original question. And then that is a rough job. That's a whole segment of your show for another day, but it's a rough job. And I finally, after I think about 13 years of doing it, I was feeling pretty burnt out.
Wow.
I salute people who hang in for longer than that. It's a long time.
13 years, a long time.
Yeah, I had a nice run, and I probably could have kept going, but I really was pretty tired of it. So there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen in that job.
So a lot of people, after you write,
you're asked,
yeah,
a project goes through this whole, obstacle course is the best way to describe it, actually, with various people either becoming attached or disattached, and somebody new comes in, and then you rewrite it again, and everybody wants to have their 2 cents in it. And it's a very, very tough kind of political process. And so when a movie comes out that's great, usually it's because it had a protector somewhere in there, like the director or the star or somebody like protected that process so it didn't go completely apeshit and off the rails. And a lot don't. They just don't work out because they fall apart in that process. So a lot of things that you write never get made, or that's how it was in the old days anyway. Mm-hmm. So anyway, right around the time that I was getting a little bored with that, my phone rang, and out of the blue, I was asked to audition for this television series that this woman was casting.
Can you say what the series was?
Yeah, it was Boston Legal was the name of it.
Nice.
It was on for quite a while. Yeah. The casting director remembered me and called me in. And I mean, at first I said, no, I don't really act anymore. Because I really didn't by that time. I hadn't acted in like 7 years at that point. And she said, oh, come in. And she mentioned something that she'd seen me do like 100 years ago on stage. And she said, I just keep remembering you from that role. And I was, oh, okay. And I came in. Yeah. It was about 1,000,000 to 1 in a strange kind of way that I would get this role. Mm-hmm. It was only going to be one episode, but it was in this kind of funny scene. And because I couldn't really do the character description as written, like I didn't do, like they were sort of wanted it to be like Truman Capote, and I don't do Truman Capote. Like I don't do that. I can't imitate Truman Capote. Mm-hmm. So I just did something completely different. I just did this guy that I used to work for that I did do kind of a decent imitation of. And he was a very crazy, eccentric guy that I used to bartend for thousands of years ago. And they loved it. They laughed. Yeah. And I got that gig. And David Kelly, who created that show, thought I was funny. Yeah. So he created this whole arc for that character in season 3 of Boston Legal.
Wow, that is so cool.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it came out of nowhere. So all of a sudden, I went from sort of 0 to 60 because the show was very popular at that time. It got very big ratings. Yeah. And so I had this phenomenal role. I mean, he really, as this kind of crazy psychopathic murderer kind of guy who's also very funny and very tragic, and like it was amazing.
Wow.
And I got to work with all these incredible actors during that time. Yeah. And so I got a lot of attention for it. And all of a sudden I was an actor again. And I started working on TV shows and mostly playing killers and psychopaths and that sort of thing. I was doing that for a while. And I was asked to teach, which I'd never done before. And I started doing that in Los Angeles. And I actually really loved it. It was great fun to do. Yeah. And I started doing, because it interested me anyway, because I kind of dig science fiction. I created this theater festival for short science fiction plays. So they were like these new original little like mini Twilight Zone episodes.
Yeah.
And we produced it for 3 years in Los Angeles. It also was a huge hit. And I just I did a bunch of stuff, but I was back to being a creative artist. And I did a show called Street Tease in Los Angeles as well that ran for like 4 years, which was the sketch comedy show. And it's just amazing. It's a really kind of amazing time. And now my journey has brought me back to New York again.
What brought you back to New York?
I think what brought me back to New York, it was I had lived in Los Angeles for over 20 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple things that brought me back. One of them was I felt like, as happens in your career, you just like every 5 years or so, you're a different actor.
Mm.
And certainly every 10 years or so, you are a completely different actor. You're in a totally different category.
Yeah.
And the category that I found myself in Los Angeles, I just found that I was sort of doing a lot of, I was very blessed to do a number of guest star shots every year.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it. People would say I was lucky because they were very good shows and they were very good roles, like popular shows that a lot of people saw. So when people would see me and I was playing the killer or whatever I was playing, they'd say, "Oh my God, you work all the time." And I would think, I don't work all the time. I work about like 5 times a year.
Yeah.
And with the current way that TV shows are being squeezed for budgetary reasons, sometimes I'm in and out. I'm shot all my scenes and I'm out the door in like 2 days. So really, if I do like 5 shows, I've worked like 10 days out of 365.
Yeah.
And I begin to just sort of feel like I had kind of plateaued in a weird sort of way. Like there was a certain kind of thing that I was doing and it didn't seem to be changing. And I wasn't sure as I got older, as much as I loved my agents and all that, I kind of felt like I can kind of understand why they're paying more attention to their 22-year-old clients. They're the ones that have that potential to kind of zoom up there and become superstars and all that. And that's a little less likely as you get older. I mean, anything's possible, but I just sort of felt like I wanted to come back to New York and do some other stuff and go back and do some theater again while I could still remember the lines and maybe see what New York had to offer, that was maybe a little different from Los Angeles. And also to live in New York again. I was getting a little tired of the traffic in LA and as this sort of general kind of, and I don't hate LA. I've been back many times since I came to New York and I've been back to work and it's been great. I've been happy to do it. If I was offered a series, I'd be back tomorrow. But in the meantime, I'm kind of having a good time here. And I also, honestly, on a more personal note, I found myself single and not young in Los Angeles. And I just sort of felt like I was not going to remarry in Los Angeles. I felt like I was kind of invisible there. And so I came back to New York and sure enough, within a year or so, I met somebody that I've been in a relationship with now for about 3 years and very happily so. And I'm happy here. I'm doing a lot of things here. And I wrote a book when I was here. I revised and created my show again, which I had kind of brought back to life and sort of updated it and started doing it here in New York. And then Random House bought it and turned it into an audiobook. And so it's been all kind of new horizons here, in addition to doing some theater, which has been wonderful, and doing some TV shows because there are a lot of TV shows here now.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of great. Again, everybody's path is totally different. I just think it pays to remember, not to be grim about it, but we don't live forever. So whatever you're doing with your talent and with your life, you need to make sure you're enjoying yourself. And if not, do what you can to change that. There are a lot of places to work. You don't have to be in any one of them the whole time.
Yeah.
You can actually take yourself up and go somewhere new and everything changes.
Yeah. It seems like you're not scared of change. Like you would take the action, or maybe you had doubts, maybe you had fears, but it didn't stop you from taking the action for changing, or trying.
Well, let's put it this way, Aaliyah.
Yeah.
I had the initial idea to leave Los Angeles after I'd been there for 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And then it took another 12 years before I actually did anything about it. And I'm sure that, all of a sudden I think, I should really do this. And then you get a job and you think, oh, okay, well, I got a job. So things are changing. So I'll stay. Or, I change agencies and the agencies, oh, well, all these new things are going to happen this year. Or the manager goes, oh, don't leave now. So-and-so loves you and they have a new show going on the air. And it's always like there's a little, something being dangled in front of me. And I also, I can't tell you I wasn't nervous about making the change. But there came a point where I thought, if I don't make this change now, when am I going to do it? Am I going to move to New York when I'm 70? I mean, is that when I'm going to do it? And so it's been great. And like I said, it's very possible I'll come back to LA at some point and live there. That's quite possible. But for the moment, I'm having an incredibly great run of it here and really enjoying everything that I'm working on, including now I'm writing some pitches. I have new representation as a writer, so I'm writing some pitches for TV shows.
Oh, wow.
Which, well, we'll see what happens. But if they sell, I'll be in them.
Woo!
Yeah, I won't have to really worry about auditioning for them because I'll be in them.
Yes.
So it's, again, because the business is changing. And when I was telling that to the producers that I was talking to, nobody had a problem with it because I wasn't saying I was going to play the lead in it. I just said, I'm just going to be in it somewhere. Right. And so it's kind of, like I said, it's a new day. There is a possibility of like being a creator these days, not just an employee, not just an interpreter. So it's a fun and interesting time. So that was a very, very long answer to what was a very simple question. Sorry about that, Aaliyah.
No, I loved it. Last questions and tips. Like, I could talk to you forever. Actually, I could ask you about writing and how you got into it. And I'm actually working on developing a pitch with a friend for a show.
Good.
And I'm not a writer, but that's all for another time, maybe.
Okay.
Last thing that you'd love to share with us, and definitely share how we can purchase your book, because it's chock full of really great specific information that I think is really helpful.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about writing that book for a while. Mm-hmm. And especially after I started teaching, which I really love to do. It's really, really fun. And that includes whether I'm working with young people who are at the beginning or I'm working with actors who they just need to change a little bit. They need to sort of change their game a little bit because they're in kind of mid-career, or some people who either kind of stepped away from their career and now they're trying to come back, or went ahead and did something else with their life and now they want to come back and attempt that thing that they felt a little too nervous to do when they were younger. And a lot of people come to study acting for a lot of reasons. But I have to say, working with them really made me think about the book. Mm. And I eventually, when I got to New York, it was the first thing I thought about was it's time to write the book. And the goal of it was to talk about what it means to be a middle-class actor, which is what I have always been my life, which is somebody who works. And there's a zillion of us, but we're not famous. Like, my name is not above the title, You're
fairly famous.
Well, thank you. I think that within my industry, enough casting people probably know who I am. And I'm not completely unknown. I've been around a long time, but I make a living and I'm creative and I haven't had to do anything outside of my industry in many, many, many decades. So that's great. But there's some certain ways to find your identity and find out what you do as an artist. And I think I've both done it for myself and I've also helped other people do a little bit. So that's what the book was sort of about, to let you know kind of what to expect to the best of my experience anyway, and to do it honestly. And there's a lot of humor in the book. The book has a lot of stories in it to sort of illustrate what we're talking about. And I'm not preaching from the mountaintop. I'm preaching from the battlefield. And so the biggest thing I can tell people to do, especially at the beginning, if that's primarily the folks who listen to your podcast, is don't worry so much about being paid, but by all means go out and do things, whether that's a student film or whether that's something you create for yourself with a friend and you shoot it and you put it up on YouTube or put it into film festivals, or if you're going to do a play or a showcase, or if you're going to do sketch comedy or whatever your thing is, just go ahead and do it. Don't wait for an invitation, just find a way to do it. Or if you don't know exactly how, then learn how to produce something for yourself on some small schedule. It's not impossible to do. You don't need a ton of money, especially now with cell phones. I mean, God, you can shoot a whole thing on a cell phone. Yeah. So it's really, if you're not doing anything, then you need to examine your motivation to do this, because the world is now, the big changes that are happening in the industry are happening with people who make things happen. So you don't have to make it happen on a global front, but you need to learn how to start making things happen so you have stuff to show, so that you're always in a position of saying, hey, see me, audition me, help me. You're in a position of saying, I'm doing something. Yeah. I'm working on this. I'm working on that. Here's a little snippet of it. Here's a little piece of it on TikTok, or here's a little piece of it on YouTube or whatever. Yeah. But you're out there sort of demonstrating that there's something happening because you're making it happen, because you want to, because you like this work. And what happens in that process is that you meet people and you form a network. You form this community of artists who provide each other with information and support and opportunities and information and advice. And out of that, it's like the boats start to rise together. When I was a young guy and I first started out, I did a lot of showcase theater in New York. And some of it was awful. I mean, some of it was just dreadful stuff. But when I looked around the other people in the cast, I would sometimes see somebody and I'd think, I really like that person. I think that person has talent. And I would kind of extend myself to them and say, I think you're great. I think you're terrific. I'd like to know you. I'd like to be friends with you. And it resulted in friendships, and then if you start hooking up with, hooking up is the wrong term to use. If you start connecting with other artists that you admire, they don't have to be famous. They can just be people that you think are good, that are trying to do it.
Right.
You plug into this kind of village, and through that village, you'd be surprised how that magically kind of starts to work out after a while. But the worst thing you can do is sort of sit back and wait for permission. Now, you do need to know what you're doing, because once you get into an actual casting situation, which is now apparently turned entirely into self-tapes. So you got to learn how to do that too.
I kind of like it personally.
Yeah, I have one tonight. I got to do one after we're done. Actually, I got to do a self-tape.
Nice.
And then I got to help somebody else with their self-tape. So it's not impossible, but whatever the task is, you got to like it enough to step up and do it. And you got to be skilled. You got to be able to demonstrate skill on demand. And that's where class comes in. So if you keep those two things going, it's probably the best insurance policy you have that you're going to move forward, meaning be good at what you do, because you're going to practice what you do and you're going to get better at what you do. So you'll feel more confident, it'll just manifest itself. And the second part is, if you become somebody who is actively looking to create ways to perform and be an artist, then that's attractive to people. People are attracted to those people, as opposed to people who are sitting there saying, I don't know, whenever you're ready, I'm ready. Just call me when you're ready.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
So all of which, if you feel intimidated, or if anybody feels intimidated by what I just said, don't be. You want to have fun doing this. So in theory, this should be fun to do, not intimidating. It should be fun to find out how to do it and then do it. So that's my advice. That's my big advice, is begin.
I love it.
And if there's a problem, if you don't feel ready, then go to class and work hard until you do feel ready, and then get going.
Yeah. I love it. That is great. Take action, begin, just do it, get help, if you need it. Love it. David, okay. How do we reach you? How do we follow you? How do we get your book?
Okay. All right. You bet. The good news is the book is super easy to get. Assuming that there are any bookstores still open, it's pretty much in any bookstore you can find. 10 Speed, the publisher, is also a division of Random House. So it's a big publication. It's not a self-published book. It's everywhere. It's pretty much in any bookstore. It's at Barnes & Noble. It's on Amazon. It's not hard to find.
And the name of your book?
The name of the book is called Working Actor.
Working Actor.
Yeah. It's a very personal, very funny book in a lot of ways, but it's also very honest. And it will tell you everything that I know. Literally everything I know about it. Doing what we do is in there. And it also has a lot of little anonymous quotes by a lot of other people in the business. They're anonymous because I want them to speak freely. So it isn't just my voice. You're hearing from many, many people from all different ranges of the entertainment industry, famous people and not famous, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what the book is. And I'm not hard to find. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I have a website, which is workingactorthebook.com.
Do we look for you as David Dean Bottrell?
Yeah, it's all three names. David and Dean are pretty easy. That's my middle name, Dean. And then the last name is Bottrell. It's 2 T's and 2 L's. That's usually where it gets screwed up when people are looking for me, but it's 2 T's and 2 L's. I'm not hard to find. If you Google me, there's usually a way to reach me.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. This was really fun.
Thank you so much. You've been an amazing, wonderful guest. I'm so grateful that you spent time with all of us.
Well, thanks. We'll go out there and break legs, Aaliyah.
Thank you.
And I wish the same for everybody who's listening. It's a fun profession. If it's not fun, it's not fun 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Once in a while, it's a big drag. But largely, it's a pretty fun profession. And everybody who's in it, well, almost everybody who's in it works pretty hard. But they enjoy their work, so it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the end of my wisdom for today.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Actors Resource Podcast with me, Aaliyah Lay. I would love to hear from you, so email me, AliyahKLay@gmail.com, ALYAKLEI@gmail.com.